July 5, 1942, 11:34 at night. A silver moon hangs suspended over the Bay of Biscay, casting a ghostly light across waters that had become a graveyard for Allied sailors. Its side a Vickers Wellington bomber, squadron leader Jefferson Greswell grips the controls, his knuckles white, scanning the endless darkness below. His radar screen glows green, showing a submarine contact barely 2 miles ahead. A German U-boat surfaced invulnerable, recharging its batteries under the protective cloak of night. Greswell has done this 100 times before, and every single time he has failed. The mathematics are brutal. A submarine can crash dive in 52 seconds. By the time any aircraft gets close enough to see its target, the U-boat commander hears the engines, sounds the alarm, and vanishes beneath the waves. RAF Coastal Command calls these missions hunting ghosts. In all of 1941, they managed to sink exactly 1 submarine in these waters. 1. Meanwhile, German U-boats were sending 400,000 tons of Allied shipping to the bottom every single month. Britain was just 12 weeks from starvation. But tonight is different. Tonight, Greswell carries something that violates 3 separate Air Ministry regulations, something built in secret by a 44-year-old officer with no engineering degree, something every expert in Britain swore was physically impossible. At precisely 50 yards from his target, Greswell reaches for a switch that has never been flipped in combat before. What happens next will sink more submarines in 5 months than the entire Royal Air Force managed in the previous 2 years of war. The man responsible for this moment was, by all official measures, a failure. Wing Commander Humphrey Leigh was 44 years old in a service that celebrated youth. He had learned to fly during the First World War, spent 2 decades drifting between unremarkable postings, and returned to active duty in 1939, when most men his age were collecting pensions. He assigned him to Coastal Command, the unglamorous backwater of the RAF where glory went to die. All fighter command pilots became celebrities and bomber command crews earned medals over Germany. Coastal Command flew endless, mind-numbing patrols over an empty ocean, searching for submarines they could rarely find and almost never destroy. But Humphrey Leigh didn't care about glory. He cared about mathematics. During his first year back in uniform, he flew over 300 hours of anti-submarine patrols. He filled notebooks with calculations that his fellow officers dismissed as obsessive nonsense. Radar detection ranges, aircraft approach speeds, submarine dive times, visual acquisition distances. The numbers all pointed to a terrifying, unshakable truth. The gap between detecting a U-boat and destroying it was exactly 23 seconds. That's how long it took for a submarine crew to hear an approaching aircraft, sound the alarm, and disappear beneath the waves. No amount of training could close that 23-second gap. No existing technology could bridge it. The RAF had tried everything. Flares took 18 seconds to ignite and illuminate the water, which also gave the U-boat a perfect warning. Acoustic torpedoes were wildly inaccurate without visual confirmation. More powerful engines only announced the aircraft's approach from further away. The official conclusion was devastating. Successful night attacks on surface submarines were technically unfeasible. It was impossible. Leigh refused to accept this verdict. The breakthrough came during a routine patrol in December 1941. His radar showed a submarine contact. He began his approach in total darkness. Then, by sheer chance, a fishing boat drifted into view, its navigation lights blazing. For exactly 3 seconds, those lights illuminated the water ahead. And in those 3 seconds, Leigh saw it. The submarine's conning tower, a black silhouette against silver waves. Then the fishing boat turned. Darkness returned. The submarine dived. But Leigh had seen enough. The problem was never power or weight or engineering. The problem was duration. Flares burned for 30 seconds, giving submarines plenty of warning. What he needed was 3 seconds of overwhelming light, activated at the last possible moment. That very night, Leigh sketched his first design on a napkin. A 24-inch carbon arc searchlight mounted beneath the aircraft. The pilot would approach in complete darkness, maintaining radio silence. At precisely 50 yards from the target, he would flip a switch. 22 million candle power would erupt from beneath the aircraft, freezing the submarine crew in a perfect, blinding illumination. 3 seconds. That was all he needed. His commanding officer rejected the idea immediately. The Air Ministry engineers explained with elaborate equations why it was physically impossible. They said aircraft generators couldn't power such a device. The weight would make the bomber unflyable. The battery requirements exceeded all available space. He listened politely to all of them. Then he went and built it anyway. For 4 months, he worked in secret, salvaging car headlamps and aircraft landing lights, testing increasingly powerful configurations. When he finally mounted a naval-grade searchlight on a retractable housing, his fellow officers mockingly called it Leigh's folly. The device added 800 pounds to the aircraft and reduced its bomb load by 4 depth charges. When his commanding officer discovered the unauthorized modification in May 1942, he threatened Leigh with a court-martial. Leigh requested just one operational test. If it failed, he would accept any punishment. On June 3, 1942, Leigh took off from RAF Coastal carrying his illegal invention. At 2:17 in the morning, his radar detected a submarine. He approached in total darkness, leveled off at 50 feet, and reached for the switch. The night exploded into day. 22 million candle power of pure white light transformed the Bay of Biscay into a theater stage. The Italian submarine Luigi Torelli was frozen in perfect clarity. Crew members scrambling, officers diving for hatches, the wake spreading white behind the vessel. The depth charges dropped. Submarine was crippled, captured just hours later by surface ships. Leigh radioed his base with 4 simple words: "The device functions perfectly." Within weeks, the newly appointed Commander-in-Chief of Coastal Command, Air Chief Marshal Philip Yalbert, ordered the Leigh Light installed on every available Wellington bomber. The results were immediate and devastating. July 5th, U-502 destroyed. July 7th, U-159 crippled beyond repair. July 13th, U-751 sunk with no survivors. By August, RAF Coastal Command was destroying more submarines every month than they had in the entire previous year combined. German Admiral Karl Dönitz issued emergency orders. All U-boats would now recharge their batteries only during the day. Night surface operations were suspended. But daylight meant RAF fighters. Daylight meant radar-equipped ships. Daylight meant death. The U-boats were trapped. By the war's end, Leigh Lights had been installed on 1,800 aircraft. The device directly contributed to sinking 212 German submarines, more than a quarter of all U-boats lost in the Atlantic. Admiral Dönitz later wrote in his memoirs that the searchlight aircraft made night operations impossible and cost Germany the Battle of the Atlantic. Captured U-boat commanders had a name for it: Das Todeslicht, the light of death. Humphrey Diverty Leigh retired as an Air Commodore in 1962. He refused every interview request and declined every invitation to speak publicly about his invention. When the RAF Museum asked for permission to display his prototype, he replied simply, "The device worked because good men flew it. Tell their stories, not mine." He passed away on November 19, 2000, at the age of 83. Today, his original prototype sits in the RAF Museum at Hendon. Beneath it, a plaque reads words that every innovator, every dreamer, every rule breaker should remember. Designed in violation of regulations, built without authorization, stalled against direct orders, saved 400,000 lives. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of hidden history, make sure to like and subscribe for more.